Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Hey folks, before we get going on our podcast today, I want you to hang around to the very end. We talk on stage to Mike Oxtein on the Old Capital Conference. Mike Oxtein's interviewed by James Eng. Mike, who's been doing this for 38 years, he owns 5,500 doors. This is the guy who you really want to listen to because he has a tremendous amount of advice, wisdom. He's the way that you want to do your business in the future if you're going to be in this business for a long period of time. So I want you to hang around to the very end, listen to Michael Oxtein at the Old Capital Conference. So let's get the podcast going with Lane Bean right now. Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And we typically be the man of the hour of the great state of Texas in real estate, Mr. Michael Becker, but he is on another due diligence assignment. So we're pleased to have the professor, Mr. James Eng. James, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Paul.
We keep on coming back to the Old Capital Conference for 2023 that was held at the middle of October or so. And we had a lot of folks participate with us. We had 550 investors sitting in the audience at the Frontiers of Flight Museum. Now, our theme this year was Top Gun. And we wanted the people in the audience to be the best of the best. And everyone has a little bit of a maverick in them. And so we had a bunch of great folks listening, but we had a bunch of great folks up on stage. So today we're going to talk a little bit about one of those folks that you're going to listen to give his presentation from the stage. And so James, talk to me a little bit about who this is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, when we set the venue and the theme, we really loved using our airplane analogy. So we thought it would be a great place and venue of the Frontier Flight Museum. And I am not a huge pilot, but there are a lot of people in the industry who have either been in the Army, Navy, Air Force, they're pilots on the side. And so a lot of people love the venue. And one of the general partners that we've done a wide variety of deals with is a gentleman named Lane Bean. And Lane was in the Air Force for I think 30 plus years, and he flew, you probably know all the jets, but very fast jets.
F-16. So.
F-16. So I don't know if people saw any of the promo videos that we did for the conference. We got in those things, and those things were pretty tight, I must say, and the little roof or the ceiling was not even closed. So I can't imagine going canopy. So I can't imagine going however many miles per hour those things go and the force that is put upon your body. But Paul and I did our best to pretend, or at least look like we were flying those things. But Lane has done it in real life. And so he really had some time up on stage to share some stories and some parallels between, times that he's been sort of on the mission in the F-16s and comparing that to real estate and drawing some great conclusions from it.
Yeah. So Lane graduated from the Air Force Academy, flew F-16s into some highly warlike environments of Iraq and Afghanistan and Bosnia, Herzegovina. So he's been doing it for a long period of time. He flew F-16s for almost 27 years. He had the best job in the Air Force. And so he made the transition a number of years ago from flying jets with your hair on fire to owning real estate. And a lot of analogies, they come out of kind of being the best of trying to do both. So Lane went from owning some small little apartment buildings of like 16 to 24 units to 75 units. And then he decided to actually build properties. And so he built a 320 unit brand new Class A building outside of Austin, Texas. He's building a property down in Lockhart, Texas. He owns a property up towards Sherman. So he's taken his experience in combat and some stories that he's going to tell from stage and translate that into what we do every day, and that's own and invest in real estate. So I thought he did a great job. And it really comes down to what he was saying is really protect your investor. And so I want you to listen to this discussion closely, and that if you have any questions, you can contact Lane Bean at Pilot Legacy Properties. Again, no plug for him, but I thought he just did a great job. Anything more, James?
That's it. Let's roll the tape.
There we go. All right, thanks.
All right, next up we have, I think I was just confirming, 32 years in the Air Force, developer, investor, and he got us our jumpsuits last night. Let's bring up Lane Bean.
Every good fighter pilot story starts the same way. So there I was. The night was an angry mistress, and I was one of 60 aircraft holding over the Adriatic Sea, waiting to cross into Yugoslavia as part of Operation Allied Force. I was the flight lead of an F-16, flight of 4 F-16s, and our mission that night was to protect the 60 aircraft against the Yugoslavian surface-to-air missiles that had already shot down 2 U.S. aircraft in the previous 3 weeks. Our plan was to divide into 2 separate figure-8 orbits positioned on the perimeter of the surface, or where we expected the surface-to-air missiles to be. Right at midnight, we checked in for roll call and crossed the border into Yugoslavia. The first 45 minutes of our mission was a choreographed aerial dance where each of those aircraft executed their specific task. With 15 minutes remaining in our mission, I reformed our formation and planned for our exit to ensure all the friendly aircraft were safe and back into good airspace. But my plan was about to change into a deadly game of dodgeball.
We need you louder.
To a deadly game of dodgeball. As I got to the turn point in my orbit, my radar warning receiver erupted like a fire alarm in a quiet theater. My visual indications revealed that I was being targeted by an enemy radar, and it locked onto my aircraft. I immediately turned in the direction to see the threat and saw a flash of white light on the ground and a marble-sized ball of fire lifting off from the ground. The enemy had me in their crosshairs, and the next 30 seconds was going to be a high-stakes dance with fatal consequences. When I tell this story, oftentimes people say, well, were you scared during that time? And I've thought a lot about that. And I can say with confidence, I wasn't scared. Because from the time I was 5 years old, I knew I was going to be a fighter pilot. And I had spent years training, educating, and preparing for a moment just like this. I had a plan B, I knew what to do, and I was ready to execute. So with my eyes on that now baseball-sized ball of fire, I put the aircraft in full afterburner and started a climb, exploding through 25,000 feet. But the missile tracked and corrected on me, chasing me down and closing at 3,000 miles an hour, at a rate each mile closing at 1 second. I communicated my defensive maneuvers to my flight, and they immediately turned to support me. But I knew that any counterpunch they could deliver was going to arrive too late, and it was on me to win or lose that fight. So now with 15 seconds, looking out the window, seeing that now baseball-sized ball of fire tracking toward me, I flipped inverted and flung my aircraft down at almost 500 miles an hour. As the continuous roar or the scream of my radar warning receiver drowned out the roar of my engine, now producing 40,000 horsepower. But the enemy was good. They had already shot down 2 aircraft. They knew what we were going to do. And they corrected the aiming. And the missile continued to track me, getting bigger and closing and catching me quickly. So I rolled upright and I pulled the nose, aggressively nose high, with the full force that I could generate from the controls, and watching as a last-ditch effort to avoid the 5,000 quarter-size cubes of hardened steel baked in 300 pounds of dynamite, now instants from impacting me. And I remember thinking, I'm going to get hit. But by God's divine protection and a thimble full of luck, the missile fell behind me and passed below my aircraft, inches outside of the distance necessary to detonate. 10 minutes later, we recircled, one more sweep of the area, and left back into friendly territory with all the aircraft safe. Mission complete. Every good real estate story starts the same way. There I was. The market was like an angry mistress. We had been under contract for 45 days on a $40 million project in San Antonio. Our mission that night, or that day, was to help our investors become better millionaires. We had 15 days prior to closing, and our mission was about to change, or our plan was about to change into a high-stakes game with costly consequences. Our loan officer erupted like a fire alarm in a quiet theater. The real estate market was under attack from an interest rate missile guided by the Federal Reserves, and it had our project in its crosshairs. Our bank reduced our loan amount, increased the interest rates, and required additional escrow that quite literally shot down our investment. We called the sales broker. We engaged with the seller on numerous occasions to try to find a solution. But those maneuvers didn't work. And I remember thinking, we're going to get hit. Our team now faced a difficult and costly decision to continue the mission and jeopardize our investor capital, or walk away from the deal, cancel the contract, and forfeit a large 6-figure deposit. When I tell this story, investors ask me, was that a hard decision? And I've thought about that a lot, and I can say with confidence, it wasn't a hard decision. Because by the time, or since the time I was 20, I knew I was going to be a real estate investor. And I had dedicated hours of training and education and preparation for a minute and a moment just like this. And so with our eyes on the mission, we canceled the contract, and Pilot Legacy took the hit to keep our investors safe. As a postscript to that, we later reinvested the capital that we collected into another project that I can report is bringing good results. Mission complete. Those final 15 minutes over Yugoslavia and the final 15 days in San Antonio are chiseled into my memory and the source of many great lessons. Our mission was clear, our team was prepared, but our plan A didn't go as planned. There are many parallels between these stories, but I'm almost out of time and low on jet fuel. So let me leave you with this one golden bullet that I hope will help you be prepared when your mission is under attack. Success in life or success in business depends on how well you can execute Plan B. I'm Lane Bean from Pilot Legacy, reporting Mission Complete.
Next person up is a friend of mine that I've known for almost 25 or 30 years, a long time. And so He's going to tell you some great and interesting stories, but I will tell you that this guy has difficulty selling real estate. He owns almost 5,500 apartment units in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston. This guy is a legend in the multifamily industry. He is a great buyer, but a terrible seller. And anything that he says is 100% truth. He's the guy who's going to tell you stories. He's not bullshitting you. He is the guy. So I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Michael Ochstein.
All right. So we got a couple minutes up here with Mike, so I'm just going to start firing away. As we say on the podcast, James, let's get to it. All right. So Brad had a question. He's ready to buy. So you a seller? So are you a seller right now? Brad said he's got a couple million to put to work.
We're not selling anything. As a matter of fact, before I came up here, Brad said it's going to be better 6 months. It's going to be better in a year from now. The bottom line is, we're looking now, we're looking tomorrow, and we're looking all the time. No one has a crystal ball. No one knows where interest rates are going. But if you find the right deal in the right location, I think you go ahead and buy it.
So you're a buyer, not a seller right now?
Not a seller.
Is there any reason to sell right now?
I think people that bought early and they needed to, everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different reason, to take advantage of the market. People that bought in 14, 15, 16, their capital's been tied up now for 6, 7, 8 years plus. They might have a reason to sell. For us, we've always put long-term, 10-year, 7-year debt, fixed rate debt on all our deals. We always buy. We were never a flipper, buy, turn, flip. We like this deal because demographics, location, area, everything that everybody in this room looks for. And
what's the shortest time you've held a deal?
The shortest time, so most of my deals are with high net worth syndications. We also did a lot of JV with institutional partners. So it's important in my thinking to either have the long-term range, hold for the long term, and do some of the JVs with the private equities. And the shortest was I did a deal with Palladium out of New York, private equity, and they're ones to get in, flip it. So we bought this brand new property at Independence in 121. We paid like $80,000 a door, and we turned around a year later and sold it for like $160,000 a door. And probably today or a year ago, it's probably worth $250 a door. But they were driving the boat, so you got to know who your LPs are, and it's very important. If it's institutional, they got a 5 to 7 year horizon. If my LPs know when they come in our deal, our plan is to buy, take care of the asset, raise enough capital, be able to refinance 5, 7, 10 years down the road, return that capital, and hold on for the long term. I think, in my opinion, that's how you build long-term wealth.
What's the longest deal you've held so far?
Well, for example, if you go Preston and Spring Valley, we bought that from Lincoln Property Company in 2000. So now we're going on our 24th year, and we're getting ready to rebrand it. New siding, new siding, new patios, new balconies, new landscaping plan. So we're probably in the process of spending about $1.5 million on that property.
How do you hold a deal for 21 years? Like most people in this room haven't been in multifamily for 21 years. So I
think Preston and Spring Valley is really kind of main and main. And, we struggled with, we bought it in 2002, went through this, everybody that could breathe could buy a single family home. So we struggled 5, 6, 7, 8. We had, nothing is perfect. We had to go back to our lender, to Freddie Mac, and say, our occupancy dropped from 95 to the...
Was this fixed rate?
It was fixed rate debt.
Fixed rate Freddie, okay.
We went to Freddie and said, look, everybody's buying a home. We've lost all our residents.
What is that occupancy?
It dropped to like the mid-80s, okay. And it was in 2005. They went from an amortizing loan, because that's really important today, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, and I apologize. But you got to communicate with your lenders. And so I went back to Freddie in 2005, and they knew what was going on. That anybody could breathe, could buy a single-family home. And I needed some interest-only debt. And I went to them, I said, I'll put the difference in an escrow account from the amortization portion and the interest, because it needed capital. And they agreed to it. So fast forward, we're going on our 24th year of owning that, and it's been a spectacular property for us.
So is it the location that's really driving that hold period?
Workforce housing. We paid $40,000 a door. My investors they've been cashed out of it for 10, 15 years. And they're still getting like 12, 14% on their original capital that they had in the deal.
So we're sort of going backwards here, which I like is, so now most people, they don't like graduate college and start right into multifamily investing. What'd you do before this?
I started at Marcus & Millichap in November of '83.
Was that a good time?
It was a great time. Well, because the same thing, history always repeats itself. So I got in, it was syndication days, everybody was blowing 4-to-1 tax write-offs, deals didn't make economic sense, guys were driving Mercedes and big cars, and here I was just a pisher out of college, and well, this is easy, this is great, it's kind of how I apologize brokers in advance, but this is how it's been for the last 3 years. So everybody was making money, and here's this guy out of college, I'm seeing all these guys driving these fancy cars, and then all of a sudden they changed the tax laws, and everything got quiet, like where we are today.
So was that 86? 86?
87. Packwood changed the tax laws. All the tax-driven deals were wiped out. RTC came involved, and that's when I started buying my first property.
When did you buy that first property?
In 88.
88. So it's only been a year or so after. What made you comfortable stepping in right there?
I always, growing up, I don't know why I just talking, but my dad manufactured concrete blocks, and I always told him, you got to own the buildings, Dad. You know, the builder might buy from you today, but they're not going to buy from you tomorrow.
Right.
You got to own the real estate. So, man, I was just so fortunate to have that first duplex on Orem, Skillman and Orem. It was like it was the greatest deal ever.
So the first deal you bought was a duplex?
A little duper.
Okay.
And then my son, Jonathan, who's in the room, we bought a little 12-unit on Lower Greenville, and I named it the Versailles because that's where I went on my honeymoon. And the guy that bought that deal changed the name. It's really pissed me off, actually.
You didn't put that in. You didn't put that in the contract.
No, I sold it a long time ago, and then I went down there the other night. My first years of marriage, we'd go down there and we'd be renovating units with my
that's
wife.
your date? That's your date night, is renovating units?
That was our date night. We'd go to the bars, drink, and we'd go see if my guys were working in the units. And then if you're in that room, why'd you change the name? The Versailles was the Versailles Castle in Paris. And it was like, that was my greatest little 12-unit. I loved it.
So you self-manage that 12-unit deal?
Oh, yeah, we self-managed it.
Okay.
And then I went down the street, bought the Wilshire house at Mockingbird and Skillman. And we did sell that. And there for a while, I couldn't even drive up and down Mockingbird. I was so depressed.
It was your baby.
It was my little 56 unit, and the Dallas Business Journal took a picture of me on a lawn chair with holes in the shoes. And, broker leads Marcus & Millichap, buys his first deal. And that was my, that was after the, big deal. 56 was my first syndication, and owned it. I think we sold it in probably 2000.
So you did probably 2 or 3 deals before you sort of left Marcus and said, I'm going to try to do this full time.
Yeah,
So a lot of people have done that in the last, let's say, 10 years. They were doing something else, and now they've transitioned to full-time real estate investor, and you've been there for a long time. What tips do you have for those people? Because it's easy when you're doing a deal a quarter to do acquisition fees and make a ton of money and sell it after 2 years. But now it might be a little bit choppy for the next 12 to 18 months. And talk about the last 3 years, because our buddy Paul said you might have been retired the last 3 years.
I have been. I was telling my acquisition guy, I go, how in the world could I put 3% debt and there's no cash flow?
So 3% was the initial starting rate.
Yeah, or 3.5 fixed rate, and the returns were so tiny. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for me to buy today. Now, a lot of y'all have done the value add, put the floating debt, flipped out. You've done great. My hat's off to you. I have always been one that I like putting my head on the pillow and sleeping at night. So I've always done fixed rate. And S2 Properties did a podcast the other day and said fixed rate was for dummies. Well, I must be a dummy. But we all got different ways we look at real estate. My way has been long-term ownership. To go back to your question, though, it's really critical that you separate the acquisition, the numbers, and to somebody that really knows the management aspect of running these properties. And the person that's been with me for 28 years, Renee Bluestein, she has run that management, and we have our knockout fights, like, putting money away, paying the investors. But in the long run, it's kind of a balanced act, and always making sure you take care of these assets, because they'll eventually take care of you and create a lot of long-term wealth.
So you guys just bought a property, I think it closed maybe a couple months ago or last month.
Yeah.
Talk about that deal. What do you like about that deal? What are the characteristics of you buying, let's say in the next 12 months? What are sort of the checklists for you to step into a deal?
We bought a deal in Richmond, Texas. It was 300 units, $58 million was the acquisition price, raised $26 million. But it was a brand new property. Just came out of lease up. Was $194 a door. It felt like just a great basis. New York Life gave us, believe it or not, 62% loan to value. Locked in the rate of 549, put 7 years debt. We liked the area, the growth story, the below replacement cost, and that's what we bought it.
So are you coming back to Dallas in terms of new stuff, or buying stuff here in Dallas, or are you going to stay in Houston, or what market do you like? I know you own across, how many units do you guys have now currently?
So we have just under 5,500 units. We're in Houston, Austin, and here. Dallas has been very challenging, and I love Dallas. I want to buy in Dallas. I just don't feel like we have not been competitive buying today. I mean, we were just in best and final on a deal up in Little Elm, and we did make it to best and final, which I was kind of excited about. We were in 5th place out of the 5 buyers. It was a 40-year HUD loan. It was a great asset. It just couldn't make the numbers. I couldn't push the numbers enough.
It was across the street from the beach that we were at on that video. So let's wrap up with this. Any sort of parting words? I know we've got a little limited time, but any parting words for the general partners here and then potentially the limited partners in the room?
Well, as an LP, do your homework on your GPs. What Brad said, making sure that they have the liquidity, that they can work out their issues, because now it's really to know what's in the bank. Make sure that they have reserves in the bank. Make sure if you're an LP, you do yourself a favor and drive the asset. Make sure there's no deferred maintenance. Make sure they're taking care of, safety issues. As a GP, do what you promise. Your reputation is everything. And the other thing is, there's going to be tough times. And the best thing I learned, because I've been through all the cycles, James, saw the crashes in the 80s with the tax law changes. Everybody could have, that could breathe, could buy a home, saw those changes. You just got to communicate with your lenders. None of these lenders want any of these properties back. And as long as they know that the properties are taken care of, they'll work with you, and you'll be able to sleep at night.
All right, last question. So all those previous 2 downturns, like the sort of 86 to 90 or 2008 to 2011, does it take that long to sort of get through the stuff? Because everyone feels like 2024 is just going to be like this flood, and then all of a sudden everything comes back, or is it going to take longer? Because we've seen some larger operators get extensions. So we think there's a maturity, but then they get another 12 months, and so are all these deals just going to keep getting pushed?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of it. You're going to see a lot of extending and pretending, and you'll see market sellers, and maybe this is kind of like 10, 11 right now. We're at the beginning. We're in inning 1.
So in 10 and 11, what were you doing?
We bought a few deals.
Okay.
In 08, we didn't even discuss this. In 08, I had like 3 deals came due at once.
A maturity. Loan
Maturity date. So same thing I'm telling you now, I lived it. So it was securitized debt. At the end of the day, a couple of them I bought my debt back and refinanced it with agency debt. And a neighbor once in 08 gave a property back. So that extending, pretending, that'll happen again today, as long as you're honest with your lenders and they'll work with you.
All right. Thank you, Mike Oxtein.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.